Well, Harry and Meghan's Netflix series released to the world this morning is packed with, well, they're not really revelations, are they? Sort of rehashed old revelations with a new twist. 8 days after the relationship became public, I put out a statement calling out the racist undertones of articles and headlines that were written by the British press. The walls of the palace have stayed silent for so long that many believed they would never speak again. But now, after months of whispers, denials, and carefully crafted statements, an unexpected announcement has broken through that silence. Reports from inside the royal estate suggest that Meghan's future within the monarchy has taken a devastating turn, far worse than anyone had anticipated. So, what could possibly be happening with Meghan? Join us as we uncover the shocking revelation by the royal palace about Meghan's future. Palace in chaos. Throughout early November, King Charles had been under increasing pressure, and the palace kept sharing only tiny bits of information with the public. Behind closed doors, senior aides quietly reshaped his schedule, removing anything that might add unnecessary stress. This meant Prince William had to take on even more responsibility, even though he was already juggling official duties, family life, and the rising tension within the royal system. At first, William thought everything was just a temporary storm. He believed that, like many times before, the calm of winter would eventually cool down the arguments and settle the unrest. But this time, something felt different. For several months, a pattern had been forming, soft at first, but becoming clearer with every passing week. In the United States, big media outlets began spreading dramatic stories, claiming that Meghan was preparing to reclaim her old role and reinvent herself for a new era in the public eye. Meanwhile, British commentators grew more irritated, calling the constant Sussex headlines never-ending drama that kept overshadowing the Crown's work. The huge gap between what American and British media were saying created a strange, empty space in the story, a silence that Meghan's team seemed more than ready to fill. Inside Kensington Palace, William received several private briefings that pointed out something deeply troubling. Anonymous sources, people no one could identify, were suddenly feeding U.S. talk shows and online platforms with fresh stories about Catherine, the royal family, and Meghan's old complaints. Many of these claims were exaggerated, and some were completely made up, but all of them were released at the perfect time to interfere with major royal events. It was a pattern no one could ignore anymore. Then the government stepped in. By late November, the Foreign Office quietly warned the palace that this renewed across-the-ocean drama was making diplomatic conversations harder. A senior minister sent a private message saying the palace needed to keep its communications united and controlled. The message was polite on the surface, but the meaning was sharp and direct. The Crown had to take the narrative back before it began affecting international relationships. During all this, two women inside the monarchy watched events unfold with growing concern. Princess Anne, who believed deeply in discipline and order, saw the chaos as something that clashed with everything she had dedicated her life to. Queen Camilla, on the other hand, feared the ongoing turmoil could weaken King Charles, especially now when he was already vulnerable. In the end, both women, though for very different reasons, agreed on one thing: William had to step in. By the final week of November, the pressure around the palace had become almost impossible to ignore. Staff felt it, advisors felt it. Even Catherine, who was usually steady and calming, felt it pressing in. And as winter moved closer, William understood one painful truth: staying silent would no longer protect his family or the monarchy. The first clear sign that things had crossed into dangerous territory did not come from a newspaper headline or an online leak. It arrived during a late-night briefing Princess Anne attended inside Frogmore Library, a room normally reserved for the most sensitive documents. That night, the room was cold, filled with a winter chill that seemed to sink into the walls and make every word feel heavier than usual. Anne, who had been trained her entire life to notice even the smallest shifts within the royal world, carefully studied a stack of reports spread across the table. On top was a summary created by the Royal Communications Monitoring Unit. It described a growing pattern seen across several US-based media sites. Together, These outlets were using coordinated talking points that hinted Meghan was preparing a big humanitarian comeback. The reports showed subtle suggestions that the royal family was unfairly holding her back. Nothing in the reports pointed directly to Meghan herself, but the style, tone, and strategy felt almost identical to her previous media moves. Anne didn't jump to conclusions. She never did, but she knew what it looked like when someone was shaping a narrative. The second sign came the next morning. William received a confidential digital packet through the palace's secure network. Inside were screenshots, timestamps, and detailed analysis showing that multiple American podcasts and late-night shows had started referring to sources inside Buckingham Palace. Sources that did not actually exist. Some claims were harmless, but others suggested tension between Catherine and senior staff. One show even implied that Catherine was responsible for an internal conflict, and that William was secretly upset with her. William stared at the screen for a long moment after reading everything. His hands tightened slightly around the tablet, though his face remained calm and composed. Outside his office, a staff member whispered quietly. He won't say it out loud, but this is the first time I've seen him look truly tired. Then came the winter briefing document. So, what does the document contain? Let's find out. The secret document. The moment that neither William nor Anne could brush aside began like a tiny spark, quiet, almost invisible, yet powerful enough to set everything on fire. It appeared out of nowhere, delivered secretly to a mid-level aide who understood instantly that this was not just another document. It carried weight, it carried danger. Inside the packet was a detailed plan for a year-end media campaign that aimed to completely reshape how the world saw Meghan's time in the royal family. The document painted Meghan as a misunderstood, forward-thinking woman whose efforts to modernize royal traditions were blocked at every turn by an old, stiff system. It was written in a smooth, polished American PR language, full of confidence and strategy. There were outlines for big TV interviews, opinion pieces in major newspapers, and even a pitch for a special documentary to be released by the end of the year. But for William, the problem was not the message, it was the timing. The campaign was scheduled to roll out during Christmas week, a period that mattered more to the monarchy than any other time of the year. It is the one season when tradition becomes almost sacred, and any hint of controversy feels like a direct blow to the crown itself. Anne read the document later that same afternoon. She moved through the pages quickly at first, her sharp eyes catching every detail, but when she reached the last section, she stopped cold. That part talked about strategic opportunities to address failures in royal charitable programs. Anne saw instantly what the writer had tried to hide between polite words. This was not a suggestion. It was a quiet accusation, and the target was Catherine. Anne was fiercely loyal to Catherine, almost protective in a motherly way. Seeing Catherine quietly blamed in a slick American media proposal made something harden inside her. Her face stayed composed, but her heart dropped into a colder place. That evening, she met William privately in the long, dim corridor of Windsor, the one where the old radiators never fully chase away the winter chill. Their footsteps echoed softly as they walked side by side, their voices low. Anne explained the situation piece by piece. How the campaign would hit the press, how the public would respond, and how Catherine's reputation, built through years of steady work and grace, would likely be the first thing sacrificed. William listened without saying a word. His jaw tightened, but his expression never broke. When Anne finally finished, he released a slow breath through his nose, the cold air making it faintly visible. "Who else knows?" he asked. "Camilla," Anne replied. "She went through it this afternoon." William stopped walking. Camilla's involvement changed everything. For many years, she had been a controversial figure in the public eye. But recently, she had become one of the strongest protectors of King Charles's peace of mind. She understood chaos, she understood public storms, she had lived through the worst of them. If even she was concerned, then this was no small issue. This was a real threat. Later that night, inside the quiet halls of Clarence House, Camilla approached William alone. Her voice was calm, but carried the tired strength of someone who had fought too many media wars. "It's starting again," she said. Different faces, same tactics, and your father cannot survive another season like this. It was the first time Camilla openly sided with William in anything involving Meghan. That moment told William that the situation was deeper, heavier, and more dangerous than anyone wanted to admit. The final warning came unexpectedly from the Foreign Office. They sent William an encrypted message explaining that rising American media stories were beginning to affect diplomatic conversations. The words were careful, diplomatic, but the truth was clear. The royal family's internal tension was now spilling into international politics. By the time the end of November approached, the signs were no longer subtle whispers. They were loud, bright, and impossible to ignore. William, the future king, the son of a frightened monarch, and the husband of a woman now being drawn unwillingly into a storm, realized one thing with painful clarity. Remaining silent would only make everything worse. A decision had to be made. So, could this lead to a family face-off? Let's find out. Royal family confrontation. The pressure that had been quietly rising all through November finally burst open inside the 1-4 room of Buckingham Palace. A room soaked in centuries of history. A place where prime ministers, kings, and foreign leaders had once whispered about wars, peace treaties, and delicate political deals. But even with all that history, the room had rarely seen a moment like this, a family confrontation that felt heavier than any past negotiation. Outside, the winter wind pushed hard against the tall old windows, making the frames rattle in a slow, steady beat, almost like a warning. Inside, the cold felt sharper, as if the walls themselves were bracing for what was coming. William sat at the head of the long polished table. A thick stack of documents spread before him. Printouts from the Royal Communications Monitoring Unit, transcripts from late-night U.S. talk shows, summaries from advisors, and worst of all, the winter briefing packet that detailed Meghan's planned year-end media rollout. To his left, Princess Anne sat with her arms folded, her expression calm but unmovable. On his right, Queen Camilla rested her clasped hands on the table, her face set with a seriousness that even the oldest staff members were surprised to see. When the private secretary closed the doors, William spoke first. "Before we continue," he said, his voice steady but cold, "I want it understood that everything said in this room concerns the stability of the crown. Not personal feelings, not old wounds." Nobody argued. Everyone knew the situation had drifted far beyond personal tensions. Anne slid her annotated copy of the winter briefing toward him. "This," she said sharply, her voice as crisp as the frost outside, "is a coordinated attempt to rewrite the story. A story that paints us as the problem. It undermines the monarchy, and more importantly, it targets Catherine." Camilla nodded. Her tone was low and controlled. "Your father cannot go through another season of chaos. He has only just found some stability after the last wave. If this campaign comes out at Christmas, he will be the first to suffer." William flipped through the documents again, not because he needed to read them, but because he needed a few seconds to steady himself under the weight of what was happening. For weeks, he had sensed this crisis building, slipping further out of control. But hearing Anne and Camilla, two people so different in temperament, speak with complete unity, gave him a clarity he hadn't fully grasped until now. The private secretary began reading from the communication reports. The room grew utterly silent. Multiple American media outlets, he said, received identical talking points from 3 accounts connected to a PR agency that previously worked with the Duchess. Anne's eyes narrowed. William didn't move, but his shoulders tightened. "There are also indirect attacks against the Princess of Wales," the secretary continued. "Claims of internal conflict, emotional instability, and even hints of charity mismanagement. None of these accusations are supported by any evidence, but the pattern is deliberate." Camilla exhaled sharply. "This is reckless, not just for Catherine, for the entire institution." And then came the line that made the room feel even colder. "If fully launched, this media cycle is predicted to dominate public discussion throughout the holiday season, overshadowing royal duties and weakening public confidence." Those last words, weakening public confidence, carried a weight every royal in the room understood immediately. As the advisors went deeper into the details, the picture became even more alarming. Foreign governments had quietly started asking whether the Crown planned to address the growing instability connected to the Sussexes. It was precisely the kind of international embarrassment the palace had hoped to avoid. When the advisors finished, Anne leaned forward, her tone firm. "William, you know what must happen. If Meghan is preparing a media assault that targets your wife, threatens the unity of the monarchy, and risks your father's health, you cannot allow it to continue." William looked down at the papers, but he wasn't reading them anymore. The answer had already settled deep inside him. The monarchy simply could not survive another global Sussex storm. Not with the king's health uncertain, not with diplomacy already strained, and not while the institution was trying to modernize under intense public scrutiny. Then Camilla spoke, her voice unusually gentle, stripped of any formal distance. "You carry the future of this family," she said softly. "If you must draw a firm line, draw it. Charles will understand, even if it hurts him." It was the first time she had openly encouraged him to take strong action. No one spoke after that. Outside, the wind moaned softly along the ancient stone walls of the palace. William finally raised his head. "I will act," he said, "but this time it must be final. No half-steps, no confusion. Immediately." The staff began drafting possible statements. William read each one carefully. He rejected anything that felt bitter or theatrical. He didn't want drama. He wanted clarity, a clean, strong message that left no room for misinterpretation. By late evening, the final version was nearly finished. The plan was straightforward. At 6:47 a.m. on November 30th, Kensington Palace would release a public statement confirming William's position regarding Meghan, ending the months of uncertainty that had worn down the family and rattled the institution. As the staff quietly left the 181 room, William remained there alone, the dim lights casting long shadows across the floor. He knew that within hours newspapers from London to Los Angeles would tear apart every word he had approved. He knew the reaction would be loud, emotional, and relentless. What did the palace disclose? Let's find out. The shocking announcement. In the quiet of winter at the palace, the decision was already made. All that was left was to announce it. November 30th arrived with a brittle stillness, the kind that hangs in the air just before something breaks. Frost clung to the stone pillars outside Kensington Palace, thin and fragile like glass. Inside, behind the heavy curtains of his private study, Prince William stood alone, reading the final draft of the announcement he had spent 12 hours perfecting. The decision had been taken the night before in the 1844 room, but its full weight only hit him now. In the Prede, on quiet, William felt the enormity of what he was about to do. Publicly draw the firm line the monarchy had taken against Meghan since the Sussex departure in 2020, and do it not in anger, but with sharp, unyielding clarity. At 6:30 a.m., Princess Anne arrived. She didn't ask if William was sure. She didn't need to. One look at his face told her everything. Placing her hand on his arm, a rare gesture from someone usually so reserved, she said, "It's time." It was almost like permission, though William didn't need it. At 6:42 a.m., Queen Camilla entered quietly, wrapped in a dark winter coat. Her arrival was unexpected. She had already voiced support the night before, but came to make sure William knew she stood with him in this final moment. Not for politics or strategy, but because she believed that ending this cycle of public turmoil was necessary for Charles's well-being. William nodded in thanks, but kept his eyes on the statement in his hands. He had rewritten it over and over, removing all emotion until only the essential truth remained. This was not punishment, not a reprimand. It was a firm final boundary, necessary and unavoidable. At 6:47 a.m., the message went live. It was short, but its meaning was enormous. Following a comprehensive review of ongoing challenges and recent public narratives, the Prince of Wales has determined that there will be no future coordination or engagement with the Duchess of Sussex. This decision, though difficult, reflects the need to protect the stability and responsibilities of the Crown. No exaggerations, no accusations, no room for misunderstanding. Within a minute, BBC, Sky News, and ITV interrupted their morning programs. CNN and CBS cut from late-night coverage to a breaking news banner. Prince William draws tragic final line on Meghan. The reaction was immediate and worldwide. In London, the silence outside Kensington Palace shifted into murmurs as commuters paused, shocked. Many had expected a clarification about recent media confusion, but not this, not a total severance. Not a statement delivered with the unmistakable firmness of the institution. In Edinburgh, a BBC analyst called it the most decisive internal boundary set by a future king since the Diana era. On social media, retired royal correspondents noticed the absence of one key phrase, and that omission alone spoke volumes. The door was closed for good. Across the Atlantic, American commentators reacted with a mix of shock and fascination. Panels on MSNBC debated whether this was William finally asserting authority or the monarchy responding to pressures it could no longer control. On CBS, an emotional anchor reflected on the early days of Harry and Meghan's marriage and asked how a story that began with such hope had ended so starkly. Inside Clarence's house, King Charles learned of an announcement from his private secretary. Though he had known the decision was coming, seeing it made public brought quiet sorrow. Still, he understood. He had taught William that a future monarch must sometimes put the crown above personal comfort. So what's the fallout of the announcement? Let's take a closer look. Royal recalibration aftermath. In the hours after the 6:47 a.m. announcement, the royal family entered a careful, measured state of adjustment. A slow, deliberate recalibration that only occurs when a decision carries consequences for years to come. The statement itself had been brief, precise, and painstakingly crafted, yet its effects radiated far beyond the palace walls. Every word had been chosen to signal firmness without drama, to convey authority without anger. But inside, those who lived and worked alongside the royals knew that no announcement, no matter how controlled, could be contained entirely. The ripples would be felt in every corner of the monarchy. At Kensington Palace, senior staff moved with quiet urgency. By 8:15 a.m., just over an hour after the statement, a rout meeting was underway. Advisors from communications, legal, and protocol departments gathered around the polished table, papers neatly stacked, laptops humming softly. Their mission was clear: stabilize the household, adjust internal records, revise briefing materials for foreign offices, and ensure a single consistent narrative reached both the public and international partners. It was work that required precision, discretion, and the kind of calm focus that can only come from experience. No one in the room seemed shocked. The tension had been building for weeks, a slow crescendo that everyone had felt. Now, with the boundary clearly drawn, there was a sense of cautious relief. One aide whispered to another, "At least now we know exactly where we stand." The simplicity of the comment bell. Decisions of this magnitude did not just settle internal disputes. They reshaped the rhythms of palace life and reverberated through corridors of power around the world. The most immediate and visible shift occurred at the Foreign Office. By mid-morning, diplomats had been briefed. All inquiries from international partners about Meghan were to be directed to a single standardized response. The message was brief, almost clinical. The matter is closed. It was designed to stop speculation, especially from American media networks that had spent months framing the story as an emotional saga ripe for sensationalism. The UK government, acutely aware of delicate transatlantic relations, understood the significance of the clarification even more than the public could imagine. Princess Anne, meanwhile, resumed her public duties with a renewed sense of purpose. Observers noted her firm posture, the unwavering steadiness in her gaze, the kind of poise that spoke of both experience and quiet authority. In recent years, Anne had weathered criticism for her strict adherence to protocol, for taking positions that sometimes seemed harsh to outsiders. Yet today, she carried herself as someone who had foreseen the storm long before it arrived, and who had quietly pushed the family to confront it before it spiraled out of control. Every step she took, every nod she gave reflected a woman balancing tradition with foresight, responsibility with resolve. Queen Camilla spent the afternoon in private reflection. Winter light streamed through the tall windows of her sitting room in thin icy beams, casting long shadows that stretched across the carpet. She had chosen to support William in part for Charles's sake, but the weight of that decision lingered, having once experienced the turmoil of public scrutiny. She recognized the familiar patterns, the subtle shifts in alliances, the quiet buildup of tension, the inevitable public judgment. Awareness came at a cost, a constant reminder that history has a cruel way of repeating itself. As for King Charles, he attended a brief morning briefing at Clarence's house before retreating to his study. Staff noted that he appeared both drained and composed, a man quietly processing the consequences of a decision he had approved in private. He understood its necessity, yet the personal cost was real. But how did the public respond to the announcement? Let's find out. Public reaction. Public reaction to the announcement was sharply divided. following patterns that had long been familiar. In the United Kingdom, particularly among those over the age of 50, the move was largely welcomed. Calls to BBC Radio reflected a sense that the monarchy had been far too patient, too accommodating for too long. Stability, commentators insisted, must precede sentiment. Across the Atlantic, however, the story unfolded differently. In the United States, morning talk shows dissected William's actions with fervor. Some panelists called the decision brave. Others questioned whether it shut the door on reconciliation too soon. Yet, amid the debate, one point emerged almost universally. Catherine's calm, composed dignity had become a symbol of stability in an age otherwise dominated by relentless noise and public scrutiny. By nightfall, the crown had assumed a new shape, quieter, more focused, more deliberate. The announcement did more than end speculation. It redefined the boundaries of the royal family itself, signaling both authority and restraint. As the winter sun slipped behind London's rooftops on November 30th, the palace grounds were bathed in a reflective stillness. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of frost, and the lamps glowed softly against the cold, casting long, deliberate shadows across the stone pathways. For the first time in many months, the monarchy seemed to stand on firmer ground, anchored by clarity and the somber understanding of its own fragility. The day's events served as both a relief and a warning. Even the strongest families, it seemed, could fracture when unresolved tensions festered too long. For many observers, the scene has a haunting familiarity. The careful statements, the quiet staff meetings, the measured public appearances, the delicate management of global perception, all echoed a history that refused to be forgotten. So, what do you think about the shocking confirmation from the royal palace about Meghan? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Don't forget to like and subscribe.